Hey there, Alex Kidman here, once again continuing on with my experimental vlog review of the iPhone 15 Pro and to a lesser extent the iPhone 15 Plus. And today I'm mostly going to talk about power. But as a reminder before I start, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I am obliged by ancient YouTube law to hector you about that. But also, if you do have any queries, if there's anything you would like to see me test, let me know. Drop me a comment. Glad to do what I can within reasonable constraints. I'm not getting into the disaster porn of destroying iPhones for fun and profit, mostly because this is a loaner iPhone, not my own, and therefore I would not, in fact, profit. But before we talk about power, I better talk about power. In this case, battery power, because yesterday the battery was relatively run down, but I'd run it fairly heavily, whereas today, well, I've done a little better. Specifically, I started at 6 a.m. and it's now nearly 5 p.m. and I've still got 47% battery, and I can assure you this has not been near a charge. In fact, I mean, you can see that from its charging graph. Hadn't been near a charger at all, and the rate of flow down has been pretty standard, pretty regular. So how have I managed that when yesterday was not as good? Fairly simple. Yesterday I did a whole bunch of video recording, and video recording on a phone will chew up the battery like nothing else except maybe games. And the reason I highlight this is because battery life is always variable like this. So whether you read my reviews, whether you read anyone else's, or watch for that matter, anyone else's reviews, don't take what they're saying as gospel about actual battery life in every circumstance, because it so much varies depending on what you're doing with the device in question. I have some fairly standard battery tests that I run, which gives me a kind of comparative idea of battery life, but it's only ever an idea. Now let's talk about actual power, and specifically the processors in the new iPhones. So I've got both phones here, having run Geekbench 6 CPU test on them, and on the left here we've got the 15 Plus. That's the phone that's running essentially the processor, the A16 Bionic, that was in last year's Pro phones. And then on the right here, we've got the smaller 15 Pro, and that's running the new A17. And look, you can see the numerical difference primarily in that multi-core score. Of course, single cores, you're not going to see quite as much of a difference. And what happens if we flick over to having a look at how the GPUs do? Well, let's have a look at that. It's a bit more stark, actually, for the GPUs, with the 15 Pro fairly clearly outscoring the 15 Plus. Neither is a bad score, but look, here's the issue with the numbers. The numbers are just numbers, at one sense. They can give you a kind of useful comparative metric if you're trying to compare like with like. But what you really need with this is something that can push them, something that can actually make use of that power. And look, this is an observation I've been making for a while with these high-end phones. It's great that we're seeing greater processing power, because you'd expect that over time. Over time, computing power increases. That's pretty basic. What we're not seeing massively are applications that really push that. Yes, I know Apple at its keynote showed off Resident Evil Village. I've seen demos of it running myself. And look, very nice, great little achievement. But the issue there is that it's not available yet. I can't really say, hey, this runs. Also, I mean, there are other issues around that in terms of longer term usage, and I really want to see how that thing hits battery life. But speaking of gaming, I also had an idea that popped into my mind, because the iPhone 15 is of course USB-C now, but for gaming, all the iPhone controllers that have been produced have been Lightning, because of course that was the connection du jour. So what happens when you get something like the Razer Kishi, highly regarded, USB-C, and connect it up to an iPhone? Well, I just so happen to have one of those. Let's see what happens. See, USB-C, USB-C. We have a little light. And then, unfortunately, we have nothing. And I have tested this across games and so on. It's not detected. It doesn't pass the MFI test. I guess that it's made for iPhone and so on. I'm guessing within this controller itself, it's got something that's looking for Android level code, not iOS level code, which is a bit of a pity. But there you have it. I suppose you'll just have to rely on other Bluetooth controllers, or once they start getting these things up to speed, having a USB-C controller that will actually work, but this one does not seem to. Pity about that. There is a point, I think, for everyday users where, honestly, while the Pro is clearly more powerful than the Plus, and of course the 15, because it's got the same processor, This is more than enough phone for most people's everyday uses. This is quite good, and obviously that extra power does come into play when you're doing more photographic things. I will get onto that in a future day, although I will throw a few photo samples at the end for anyone who sticks around for the whole video. Bit of a spoiler there. But I don't really feel like everyone needs that higher end power, especially when you consider that Apple's processors actually benchmark a fair bit faster than anything you get in Android land, and the same observation is true for Android phones. Those high-end Samsungs, the high-end Google phones as well, more than powerful enough for just about everything. Not surprising really, because the apps have to be written to run on the majority of phones, and right now these are the new rarefied air of phones, not the majority of phones. So I think it'll take some time before we really see apps that stretch these phones to any applicable degree. Of course, that does get you a reasonable degree of future-proofing, and here Apple's actually pretty good. While they never explicitly say, we will support a given phone for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, whatever, they tend to support for a fair while. And admittedly, some Android makers are starting to catch up with that. I've just done my review, in fact, and you should go check out my review of the Galaxy Z Flip 5, and there, that's getting a whole bunch of years of Android updates, security and OS. Nice to see from Samsung. The ball is in Apple's court here, but generally speaking, that's a game of tennis. It plays pretty well. Anyway, those are my broad overall thoughts on the power of the iPhone 15 Pro and iPhone 15 Plus. What do you want to know? What do you want to see me test in this regard? Are there other tests you'd like to see me do? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.